if you say authenticity and the real life, of course, you get into questions of identity. Who are you, right? When you talk about authenticity, you want to be doing something which is in line with who you are. So basically, this idea of consciousness, the unified you, is a construct developed out of this weltering complexity that is your brain.
I think about that phrase, you are what you eat. And it started out as a nutritional adage, good food in, and you will have good health. But there's much more to it, because what we eat is where we come from. It's our land and our culture. It's our construct, as we've already heard, the way we interpret ourselves. It's our family connections, our childhood influences. It's our relationship to the community, both social and economic relationship. It's our relationship to the land. It's even to some extent our politics, our values, our view of the world, and our stories. And for me, authenticity, whether in architecture and design or in food, springs from local knowledge and from local ingredients. It's care to attention and detail. It's love, it's personal, it's stories, and it's experiential. So it's my neighbor calling over the back fence, Amy, feel free to pick our apple tree. And it's me peeling those little apples one by one and John chopping them up and me mixing them with sugar and cinnamon so that they're not too tart anymore. And it's me learning to make pie crust for my mother-in-law and filling it with those apples and crimping the edges and baking it and sharing it. That's authenticity. It's the knock on the door after dinner. It's our neighbor from across the back alley, and he's bringing us 2 fresh trout to thank us for helping roof his garage. And it's the memory of that sizzling, buzzing summer day when I was a little girl and we'd go pick Saskatoon berries as a family. And it's knowing that even in this mass-produced, supersized supermarket society, you just can't buy stories like that.
And so what do we mean when we talk about the authentic? I think you can't talk about the authentic without asking as opposed to what, right? You can't say this is an authentic cup without saying, well, as opposed to what? Because everything just is what it is. And that sounds like trite, but everything that exists is genuinely itself. To the extent to which the search for the authentic manifests itself as a fondness or a nostalgia for the past, for a time when we lived in small communities and we fished and hunted and all that it neglects a whole lot of things that happened over the last 100 years, for instance. I've taken a run at David Suzuki at the end of the book, mostly because after taking on Naomi Klein in the previous book with Joe Heath, I thought, who's left? But David Suzuki says what I think is kind of an asinine thing at the end of the book about how if he had to choose between being born today and being born in, I think, 1934 or whatever, clearly the better option is 1934, which I just think's asinine. And with respect to the authentic, I think that very often what's happened is that it's become just another consumer good. And Amy Jo pointed this out at the end, the way it becomes, you can get organic at Walmart now. In fact, you can get local at Walmart now. Walmart announced last week that they're going to have a full slate of local products, which tends to drive people who actually believe in the local absolutely around the bend. And we can talk about the reasons for that as well. But the broader point is that it's unfortunately true that there is nothing that you cannot buy. And status is one of the things you can purchase. And a lot of what we do under the guise of the authentic is a form of disguised status seeking, I think.
I'm just not terribly interested in issues of, it's very natural for us to fall into issues of, or discourses of identity and values and moralization, but I'm not terribly interested in those things because, for one thing, as I said, what's your identity, authenticity, and the rest of it? I think Andrew's absolutely correct, and his book is a devastating indictment of it. If you approach that cloud of smoke, eventually you will discover and put your arms around it that it's actually just smoke. There's nothing else there. But there are real issues here, and organic, I think, is like a great example of this. If you embrace organic as a matter of identity, you moralize the issue. You infuse it with moral judgment. It's the correct thing to do for any number of reasons. But really what it is that very human instinct for moral judgment is what's at work. This is now becomes a good thing, and pesticides become stigmatized. They're bad. It's interesting because I would point out that in all your talk, you never mentioned cost. Cost does matter. But if the people with the ability to pay for that extra cost want to pay that extra cost, and the food tastes better, great. That's terrific. Do it. But we have to be mindful of those small matters of agricultural yields and feeding almost 7 billion people on planet Earth. And let me tell you, you aren't going to do that without pesticides. Not now, not the way the science exists. What bothers me is value judgments based on identity, because that's when you get into trouble. If you want to say we should be encouraging organic agriculture because pesticide use is causing large dead zones in oceans, and that is contrary to our values, both in terms of self-preservation and just in terms of damaging a life on planet Earth, that's perfectly reasonable to me. But when you tell me that we should be embracing organic because it's more authentic, it's about who we are, you know, that ephemeral gunk, frankly, I have no respect for whatsoever. That I have a big problem with. The problem is it becomes too easy. Once we stigmatize something, such as pesticides, it becomes too easy to evade the hard questions, such as, for example, well, if you eliminate all the pesticides now, large numbers of people on planet Earth will starve.
I tried, and there is nothing in my book or my writing or my personal philosophy that moralizes agricultural practices or immoralizes agricultural practices. I come from a farm, and it's a big grain farm, it's a GM farm, and there's no way I'm going to tell my brother he can't farm that way. And I also recognize that we cannot produce the amount of foods that we do here on the prairies without using these practices, and they have revolutionized food production in the world. But I think we can make decisions about the food that we eat without moralizing or without extrapolizing or without airy-fairy because it's good for the planet kind of thing. And we can make those decisions on a personal basis. We can decide we want to eat organic food or not, or we can decide we want to buy Joe's food or not, whether it's organic or not, or we can decide that we want to buy the food from this market and not that market, you know, based on whatever decisions that we feel suit our own personal moral values. And I don't think there's any reason to be black and white about it.